For almost 75 years, the Korean peninsula has been divided. The two countries share an ancient heritage and culture, but today are still officially at war. The recent history of North and South Korea is a story of conflict and separation that at times has pushed the world right to the very edge. A NASA satellite photo taken in 2016 shows probably better than any other single image the differing fortunes of modern-day Korea. To the south, the bright lights shine out from one of the planet's richest economies and most advanced societies. Such contrast to the darkness of the north, a secretive, repressive and dilapidated state left behind by the world around it. North Korea has deliberately cultivated its image over its short history. The Kim family has ruled this country for almost 75 years, from grandfather to father to son. The dynasty has reigned uninterrupted, but it has not been without challenge.
If we look at the history of the whole Korean peninsula since the late 19th century, it's been one of turmoil, almost without cease.
For the first half of the 20th century, the Korean peninsula was a single country, occupied by the Japanese.
The city of Seoul, capital of Korea, is occupied by American forces.
Their surrender and eviction in 1945 is the starting point for what we now know as North and South Korea.
It was not South and North Koreas who decided to split the peninsula. It was the Allies, so US, China, Russia.
The Americans, they realized that the Russians were in a position to occupy Korea. So they wanted to propose a division line for two zones of occupation. And in the middle of the night, they sent a couple of officers into a side room. They decided to suggest the 38th parallel.
North Koreans believe that they have been the victim of outside aggressors. Western history records it very differently.
It was North Korea who invaded South Korea on 25th of June in 1950.
It was the start of a vicious conflict that would last 3 years and define relations on the peninsula to this day.
What did you know about Korea?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. It was all new to me. I tried to look it up on the map to see where it was exactly and so on, but it was just all new to me. I wasn't really looking forward to going, to be honest.
Peter Tiley was 18 when he was sent to Korea. He didn't fight in the Second World War, far too young, but joined the Royal Fusiliers on national service.
And my first reaction was it was so primitive. No build, just sort of wooden huts, dirt tracks for roads and so on. Very, very primitive. They seem to be short of food and everything there, you know. They seem to be scavenging. That was my impression anyway.
In 1950, the Chinese joined the conflict on the side of the North Koreans. The Americans, under a UN remit, gave their support to the South. The result was mass slaughter.
The Fusiliers, in fact, I think lost a total of 38 men.
And how about you? Any of your friends? Any of your...
Yes, in fact, one of the fellows I signed up with in the Queen's Regiment at Guildford, he was one of the first killed, actually. Very sad day.
It was very much a civilian war. You know, more civilians died than soldiers in the Korean War. It was utterly devastating. The war swept up and down the peninsula sort of 2 or 3 times.
South Korean government denied to sign on the peace treaty. Technically, we are still during the war. For older generation, like my parents or even grandparents, it was something that is still significant in their lifetime.
As well as being physically divided, North and South Korea went down two different political paths. The South chose free market capitalism, whilst Kim Il-sung allied the North with its communist neighbours, China and the Soviet Union.
And Kim Il-sung did adopt Stalin's model, nationalisation of the economy, close control of society, surveillance of people.
At the beginning, if we compare at that moment, North Korea had a better economic status than South Korea. They are bordered with China and Russia, so it was easier for them to have an influence.
And it's often said that by the late 50s, early 60s, North Korea was the second most industrialised country in East Asia.
But it didn't last. The Soviet Union collapsed and North Korea was left exposed.
It just threw North Korea into, I would say, pretty much panic, and that had very real consequences for North Korea as well. It lost its source of subsidised trade, it lost its security umbrella. The economy collapsed by the early to mid-1990s, compounded then by natural disasters and famine and so on. So it created this, I think, profound sense of sort of psychological unease and insecurity from the North Koreans.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style.
As North Korea was faltering, South Korea was transforming itself from poor neighbour to become the 11th richest country in the world. It is the home of Samsung, Hyundai and the legendary K-pop. Seoul might only be 35 miles from the border with North Korea and well within range of Pyongyang's missiles, but culturally, economically, politically, it is a world away. Jin Yobcha in many ways embodies this modern cultural divide. She is a contemporary dancer, a celebrity judge on the Korean version of Dancing with the Stars, and she choreographed part of the opening and closing ceremonies of the recent Winter Olympics in South Korea. An event which was in many ways a coming of age for the country and a rare example of unity on the Korean peninsula.
The main message we tried to deliver through the Olympics was peace, passion and harmony. The most meaningful thing for us and for the event was that the North and South teams entered together in the opening ceremony, and also we had the unified teams for several sports. I think this had a very positive influence on relations between North and South. For the contemporary generation, I can say there's no border between Western and Eastern, or between the Western world and the Korean world.
In North Korea, images and statues of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-Il are everywhere. They are worshipped as gods, a besotted personality cult that has been carefully and brutally nurtured by the Kim family.
It's more useful to think of North Korea as a 19th century Oriental despotism that, through a curious twist of fate, has survived into the 21st century.
When I reported from North Korea, this personality cult was immediately noticeable in everything we saw and were told.
Yes, we have that portraits.
You have the portraits in every classroom.
Office, even in our household, we have that kind of portraits.
Okay. Why?
They are our leaders, and we respect them. They are in our hearts.
Kim Jong-il died in 2011. It was a moment of national outpouring. For the new, young and relatively unknown leader, Kim Jong-Un, it was also a moment of potential instability as he sought to assert his power.
Kim Jong-il was not particularly liked by North Koreans. They obviously feared him and so on, but he was not but there was a whole generation that did genuinely have some affection for Kim Il-sung. And Kim Jong-un has very much consciously modelled himself on his grandfather. He's been made to look like his grandfather, Kim Il-sung. He stands like him, he gesticulates like him. The paramount goal for the leadership of North Korea is regime survival.
Adoration and extreme reverence of this kind relies on the regime being strong, and the development of nuclear weapons was one way of doing that. North Korea carried out its first nuclear test in October 2006. John Everard was the British ambassador to North Korea at the time. He only found out about the test by accident.
By sheer fluke, the North Koreans detonated their device on the day that the German embassy in Pyongyang was holding their party to celebrate German National Day, German Independence Day. On a whim, I thought I'll just see what the news is, and logged up the BBC. And there, to my horror, I saw that North Korea had actually, while we had been sitting downstairs, had exploded a nuclear bomb. So I printed out the report, handed it to the German ambassador, and I could see his face freeze. And he simply leant across to the Vice Minister, and I couldn't make out the words, but was clearly saying something like, "What on earth do you think you're playing at?" The Vice Minister just pretended not to hear.
This was the start of a new period of global instability.
What they were trying to do was to protect the regime, to make themselves strong enough to stand up what they perceived to be the US hostile policy, and possibly to be able to get into negotiations from a position of strength. What they hate is the suggestion that they are weak or, in some ways, a minor state. They have a great sense of pride.
Successive US presidents tried to negotiate or threaten North Korea into submission, none successfully. Bill Clinton came closest, but ultimately North Korea always chose its nuclear ambitions over any deal with the West.
If you look at it from their point of view, they see all these exercises going on their border using strategic assets. You see nuclear bombers appearing, you see submarines appearing, you see battle groups appearing. So I think their problem is that they may see these facts, which we see in a particular way, we see as non-threatening, and they see them as genuine threats.
Under Kim Jong-Un, North Korea hasn't just existed, it has advanced. His historic step across the border and into the south only happened because he feels strong. And he only feels strong because his country is now a nuclear power. Kim Jong-un is about to achieve what his father and grandfather wanted, but never got: a face-to-face meeting with a sitting US president. Could this then be a turning point in history? A moment for North Korea to come out into the open? Or will Kim Jong-un retreat back into the darkness and once again shut the doors on the outside world?